So Dr. Dobson, thank you so much for joining me today. So tell me about this. You have your book, Your Legacy, here, and you also have Building a Family Legacy, which is a pretty big initiative.
Yes.
What can you tell me about the book and the project?
Well, I have been writing since 1970. My first book came out at that time. I've written 40 books approximately since then.
Only 40? That's amazing.
Well, for families. I also wrote a graduate textbook for medical students, but I've been writing for a long time. But this book is kind of the capstone of all that's gone before. A lot of those other books have pointed toward what I have come to say in this book, and that's why I feel so strongly about it. It's also why we did the video series that's coming out in October.
You know, the word legacy stands out, right? I mean, it stands out in all of this. Why legacy? Why the focus on that word?
It's important to understand the difference between an inheritance and a legacy. An inheritance is something that you give to people. It's usually monetary one way or the other, and it's what you give to those who come behind. Legacy is what you build in someone. At least that is the way I interpret it in this book and in the film series. It's what you are trying to do primarily with your children, but with others. It's the character that you want to build in. It's the values that you hope they have. And I have very strong Christian views, and it's the Christian faith as well.
Which is interesting, because I think the way people look at legacy a lot of times is what they're going to leave behind for the world, you know.
Yeah.
And it's a very different way of looking at it, what you just described.
It is, because that puts the emphasis on me.
Right.
It's what I want to leave behind that people will remember. It really isn't very important that I be remembered. I don't put much stock in that. For how long? 3 generations? I mean, that doesn't have any lasting benefit. But building a child, particularly, from the ground up and putting those values and perspectives in them and helping them to cope with life, and especially knowing who they are as a child of God, that will last. That has permanence.
Yeah, it's just such a fascinating way of looking at it. And today, I mean, there's so many struggles, right, for young families. What do you think some of the things that these families struggle with today, how is that different from the things they struggled with maybe 30 years ago, 40 years ago?
Well, it's tougher today because the culture has changed. You know, when I was a kid, you didn't worry a lot about children. I would take off on a Saturday with my friends when I was 10, 12 years of age on bicycles, and we'd be gone till 4 o'clock in the afternoon. We'd take a lunch and be gone. People wouldn't do that today. They would worry about them every hour of the day. You can't even send a kid to a bathroom without worrying about who's in there and what will occur.
And why? Why do you think all of this?
Well, the world has just gotten darker. It's changed so much. You know, I don't really believe that we should allow sleepovers for our kids, because you never know what's going to take place there. And you can be right about that decision for you know, most of childhood, and then you make one mistake. You know, a brother has a friend who comes over, or a stepfather, or who knows who.
Would you have felt the same way 20, 30 years ago?
I would not have.
That's
I would not have. I think child pornography is responsible for a lot of that. I served on the Attorney General's Commission on Pornography in the 80s. This was President Reagan's appointee, and I saw it coming then. I saw that the culture was moving in that direction. And now it's so prevalent. You read in the paper, which is not reported in the news usually, you read in the paper that a child has been molested or killed or abducted, and they rarely say there was child pornography or adult pornography in the garage or in the house, but it's always there when there's a sexual component to what takes place. But you know, that's just one tiny aspect of my concern today. The culture is just at war with families.
Well, a lot of people are
for the hearts and minds of the kids, yeah.
And a lot of people are talking about pornography now as an issue that really is having an impact on people. And there's, of course, two sides. One side that says, no, it's not a big deal and it's just fun, who cares? And the other side that says, no, this is really having a psychological impact on people. And as a psychologist, I mean, you've been an author, a commentator, a psychologist, you know, what do you think that impact is? I mean, you described some of it just now, but what is the profound impact in your view that porn has on people?
It is incredible in its impact. You may know that I was the last person to interview Ted Bundy. Are you aware of that? Ted Bundy, the serial killer who may have murdered as many as 100 women, certainly 40 or more. He confessed to most of those. And the reason he talked to me and he wouldn't talk to anybody else, there were 300 reporters there, 19 uplink dishes ready to talk to him. He would not talk to any of them the night before the execution in Florida State Penitentiary. The reason he wanted to talk to me is that he had read the 2,000-page report from our commission, and he saw himself in there, and he saw the role that pornography had played. Didn't blame it. He took the blame for it, ultimately. He certainly did with me, and that's on video. But it was, when he was about 13, he was messing around a dump, and he found detective stories. And I don't know if you know about or remember those early evidences of violence in magazines, but the women were always tied up, and they had, you know, they were muzzled, and he saw that, and he got into it, and he got really captured by it. And pornography is never static. It moves. It becomes more extreme and more addictive as time goes on. And for some people like Ted Bundy, they get to a fire trail where they've seen everything there is to see, and they decide to play it out. And that's where it starts.
And for the the vast majority of people who use it, and obviously it doesn't have that sort of extreme impact.
That's true.
But for marriage, for instance, right? When
Yes.
we talk about marriage, I want to talk to you about the state of marriage in America. But what's the impact of pornography on marriage?
Well, that's controversial, and people have different views on it. I think it usually turns out to be harmful, and the reason's because men and women are different sexually, and they have a different response to what they see. For women, it has a more romantic component to it. For men, it is visual and often violent. And what a man wants from a woman is to, very frequently, is to ask her to imitate what he's seen in pornography. And there is absolutely nothing that can occur in reality that can compete with airbrushed nudity and all that can occur in pornography. So I think it limits or damages the sexual relationship between a man and woman. It's like taking a drug, but you're going to need more, and it doesn't stay the same, as I said. So, I have very strong feelings about this. I spent 18 months on this commission studying it, and I've also seen it in my practice, and I just know what it does to children and what it does to adults as well.
And while we're talking about marriage, what role does marriage play in building legacy, A, and then B, what's happening in America with marriage right now? What are you seeing happen? What are some of your thoughts on that?
Well, as far as building a legacy in children, It's best, obviously, if there's a man and a woman, because there are two role models here to get a message across to kids. And it's a big job. It's a huge job. You do that job of raising children correctly, and you've got to give priority to it. That's the other thing I was going to mention when you asked me about what's different now than then. We run faster now than we have in the past. That's not a new phenomenon, but it is certainly, I think, a cultural aspect now that works against family. Oh, everybody's exhausted. Everybody's running 100 miles an hour, and you've got two careers going full blast. And the kids come home to an empty house, and the parents are often too worn out, too tired to even know what's going on at home. And children cannot raise themselves. They require adult leadership. In one of my books, bringing up boys, I talked about boys are like a car going 70 miles an hour down the freeway. Somebody has to keep their hands on the wheel or help him with it, or he'll run it into the ditch or into the center divider. Yeah, I mean, that's the way boys are. They tend to do goofy things, and especially as adolescents. And some adult who cares about him has got to have the time and the energy to work with him, to teach him, to, in case of boys, to teach them how to relate to women, and teach them to be caring and sensitive to women. That doesn't come natural to a boy. There's so much to learn.
Which is why the marriage unit, you know, in your view, is so important.
Yeah, it's absolutely why it is important. And in a culture where it's starting to fall apart, not starting, we're seeing it. It's happening. Then the children are the victims.
And what about Christianity as a whole? I mean, for the last 40 years, you've sort of seen this and you've been so embedded with it. When you look at what's happening in society, what do you sort of see as the role of Christianity right now, and what's sort of the future outlook, which can always be dangerous to sort of look into the future, but you know, when you think about the faith's role in society?
Well, the family is not just a Christian enterprise. You know, it goes all the way back. Every continent on earth, every place where mankind has taken hold, the family, the marriage unit has been evident. When you start to weaken that or undermine it, when it becomes less significant, it influences the entire culture, and in fact the entire superstructure of culture can come crashing down. That's happened in Rome, it happened in Greece, it's happened throughout history. And I don't think that America can survive in the form we have known, being perhaps the world's leader in many, many areas. I don't think that will continue if we allow the family to disintegrate. And that is, in fact, what's happening.
Have you seen this ramp up in the last couple of years? Do you feel like this has been coming for a long time? You know, what's sort of your view on not only the family denigrating, but also, you know, faith as a whole, the role that it's played traditionally in society?
Yeah, that's changing very, very rapidly. There has been a commitment between husbands and wives. You know, my family, if you just look at the totality of the last 3 generations, there were a couple of divorces, but not very many. It was just different then. And now, marriage is just wobbly almost from the beginning.
How do we fix it?
Well, that's another matter.
Another loaded question.
That's where Christianity comes in. And I'm speaking to you as a deeply committed Christian. That's the kind of the fundamental, that's the foundation on which everything else is based. And there are principles in there that hold families together, hold men and women together, the whole concept of marriage. is rooted there. And as Christianity begins to falter in the culture, the family is the first victim. You know, the other principles I take books to write about, but how to build on a relationship with each other. My wife and I just celebrated our 54th wedding anniversary 2 weeks ago, and I think it's going to work.
Yeah, well, you've got a testament to it then, right? You figured out a formula to make it work well then for 54 years.
She's the best thing that's happened to me.
I love that. That's great. Well, one last question for you. In 2008, you published this letter from 2012 to Obama, to Obama's America, or in Obama's America. Have you seen some of that come true? I mean, that was controversial at the time. You know, you put this out there and you made some, not predictions necessarily, but some things that could happen if he were elected. At the time, he didn't even serve his first term yet.
Most of what I was concerned about has been validated. One of them, I don't remember that whole letter, but one of them was that when President Obama was then a state senator in Illinois, 3 times he worked to preserve the right, if you will, of babies as products of botched abortions, the right to kill them, doctors to kill them when they've already been born. You know, his commitment to the sanctity of human life, which I believe very strongly in, was obviously not there from the beginning. He was one of the most liberal senators in the U.S. Senate. Perhaps some people say the most liberal. And, you know, he has a different view of marriage than I do. I believe that it is intended to be between one man and one woman. That makes a lot of people angry. I'm entitled to what I believe.
And you've been consistent on that.
I have. That's nothing new.
Right. Well, listen, I really appreciate you coming down today and talking with me. Thanks a lot, Dr. Dobson.
Thank you, Billy. It's a pleasure to get acquainted with you. Let's do it again.
Absolutely.
Okay.